Now we'll move on to using our second color. Insert your hook back into the loop and pull the yarn tightly against your hook. Remove your stitch marker. We'll now be doing an invisible color change. In the next stitch of your round, insert your hook into the back loop only rather than under the two loops. This will leave your front loop unworked. Pick up your next color and pull it through both the back loop of the stitch you're working through and the loop on your hook. You can now see that the white yarn replaces the blue on my hook. We'll come back to that unworked front loop. Now you can secure your new yarn color by tying it in a knot with your old yarn. Now we're ready to begin round 15. Starting with a single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method, insert your hook under the front loop of your next 2 stitches. Pull up a loop, yarn over, and draw through both loops on your hook. That completes your first invisible decrease. Place your stitch marker and then work 1 single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. And again, we'll be repeating that same sequence around, starting with a single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method. So insert your hook under the front loops of the next 2 stitches, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through both loops on your hook, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. Continue this repeating sequence of single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 4 stitches. When you reach the end of the repeating sequences and you're working your last repeat, go ahead and do your single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method. Then work 1, 2, 3 single crochets, and your last single crochet will be worked into the front loop of that stitch that we left unworked at the beginning and under the color change. So insert your hook under that front loop and push it through under the color change, and then work your single crochet like normal. At the end of this round, you will have a total of 30 stitches. For round 16, remove your stitch marker and we'll be repeating single crochet 2 together, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. Work your first invisible decrease, replace your stitch marker, and work 1 single crochet in each of the next 3 stitches. And again, single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method, and 1, 2, 3 single crochet, and continue this repeating sequence until you reach the end of this round. At the end of round 16, you'll have a total of 24 stitches. Moving on to round 17, remove your stitch marker, and we'll be repeating single crochet 2 together, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. After you've worked your first invisible decrease, replace your stitch marker, and work 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. And again, single crochet 2 together, and 1 single crochet, and 1 single crochet. And continue repeating single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method, followed by 1 single crochet and 1 single crochet until you reach the end of this round. At the end of round 17, you'll have a total of 18 stitches. Now it's time to add stuffing. Pull your hook up to create a larger loop and remove your hook so that you don't accidentally pull out any stitches while you're stuffing. Pull apart your stuffing so that you're only using small pieces at a time. Using small pieces helps to prevent any bumps in your piece. Push the stuffing down so that it covers all sides of your piece. Don't ball up your stuffing before putting it inside. Make sure that you're separating it into smaller pieces. Make sure that you're always keeping an eye on the stitches on the outside of your piece so that the stuffing isn't showing through. If you can see your stuffing through the stitches, you've likely added too much stuffing. Continue adding stuffing until your piece is completely full. Your piece should be firm, but not hard. After you finish stuffing, we'll move on to round 18. So go ahead and replace your hook and pull the yarn tight against your hook. Remove your stitch marker, and for round 18, we'll be working a single crochet 2 together, followed by 1 single crochet, repeating around. So you'll work your first invisible decrease, replace your stitch marker, and then work 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and again, single crochet 2 together, followed by 1 single crochet in the next, and continue this repeating sequence until you've reached the end of round 18. At the end of round 18, you'll have a total of 12 stitches. If needed, add a bit more stuffing before we move on to our final round of this piece. Now we'll begin round 19, where we'll be decreasing all the way around. Remove your stitch marker and work your first single crochet 2 together, and then replace your stitch marker. And continue with single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method until you've reached the end of this round. When you've reached the end of round 19, you'll have a total of 6 stitches. Now it's time to close up this little hole that remains. Start by cutting your yarn. And pull the yarn tail all the way through the loop on your hook. Now that your yarn is fastened off, we can remove the stitch marker. Thread the yarn tail through your yarn needle. We'll now be weaving the yarn tail through every stitch around. I prefer to use only the front loops when closing up this hole for the final round. It just gives a bit of a cleaner finish. Continue weaving in and out of every stitch of the final round of your whale. When you've gone through every stitch, pull tight to close up the hole. Secure the yarn tail with a knot. And push the yarn tail through your piece. After you've hidden the yarn end inside, cut the yarn. Use your yarn needle to tuck in the very last edge. And that completes the whale body. It's time to move on to the tail. Starting with the first tail fin, begin with a magic ring. Wrap the yarn around your fingers toward you twice. Insert your hook under the front piece of yarn and pull up the back piece of yarn, twisting to create a loop on your hook. Then chain one and slide your fingers out of the magic ring. Work 6 single crochet stitches into the magic ring. After you've finished your 6 single crochet stitches, pull your yarn tail to close up the magic ring and secure your yarn tail. Now we'll move on to round 2, where we'll be repeating 2 single crochets followed by 1 single crochet. Work 2 single crochet stitches into the first stitch. And place your stitch marker into the first stitch from this round. And work 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Repeat that sequence again, 2 single crochets into the next stitch, 1 single crochet into the following, and continue around until you've reached the end of round 2. At the end of round 2, you'll have a total of 9 stitches. Now we'll move on to round 3, so remove your stitch marker, and we'll be repeating 2 single crochets followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. Work your first 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and then replace your stitch marker into the first stitch of this round, and then work 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. Continue this repeating sequence of 2 single crochets followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches until you've reached the end of this round. At the end of round 3, you'll have a total of 12 stitches. Now we'll move on to round 4, where we will be working 1 single crochet in every stitch around. Remove your stitch marker, work your first single crochet, and replace your stitch marker. Continue working one single crochet in every stitch around until you've reached the end of round 4. At the end of round 4, you'll have a total of 12 stitches. Our next round is a decreasing round, so you'll want to tuck in your yarn tails at this point. For round 5, we will be doing a single crochet 2 together all the way around using the invisible decrease method. Remove your stitch marker and work your first single crochet 2 together by inserting your hook under the front loop of your first 2 stitches, pull up a loop, yarn over, and draw through both loops. Then you can replace your stitch marker into this first stitch of the round. Continue making single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method until you reach the end of this round. At the end of round 5, you'll have a total of 6 stitches. This completes the first tail fin. Cut your yarn and fasten off. Remove your stitch marker and set this piece aside. Now we'll move on to the second tail fin. The second tail fin is worked just the same as the first, however it is finished a bit differently. Start by making a magic ring and work 6 single crochet stitches into the magic ring. After you've made your 6 single crochet stitches into the magic ring, pull the yarn tail tightly to close the ring. Secure the yarn tail. Moving on to round 2, we'll be repeating 2 single crochets followed by 1 single crochet. Work your first 2 single crochets into the same stitch and place your stitch marker in the first stitch of this round. Next, work 1 single crochet into the next stitch, and then continue repeating the same sequence of 2 single crochets into the next stitch, 1 single crochet into the one after that, until you reach the end of round 2. At the end of round 2, you'll have a total of 9 stitches. Moving on to round 3, another repeating sequence of 2 single crochets, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. Remove your stitch marker and work your first 2 single crochets into the same stitch, and place your stitch marker into the first stitch of this round, and then work 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. And continue repeating 2 single crochets into the next stitch, 1 single crochet, and 1 single crochet until you reach the end of round 3. At the end of round 3, you'll have a total of 12 stitches. Now moving to round 4, you'll work 1 single crochet around, so remove your stitch marker, work your first single crochet, and replace your stitch marker, and continue on making 1 single crochet in every stitch around until you've reached the end of round 4. At the end of round 4, you'll have a total of 12 stitches. Moving on to round 5, we will be working a single crochet 2 together all the way around. Remove your stitch marker and work your first invisible decrease. And continue working single crochet 2 together using the invisible decrease method until you've reached the end of this round. At the end of round 5, you'll have a total of 6 stitches. Do not cut your yarn and do not fasten off. We'll be joining our 2 tail fins together. For round 6, we will be working 1 single crochet in every stitch around both fin pieces. Remove the stitch marker from your second tail fin, the one that is still on your hook. Rather than starting round 6 on the fin that is still on your hook, we're going to be starting round 6 on the other tail fin. Insert your hook through any stitch on your first tail fin. Work a single crochet through that stitch. Add a stitch marker to the first single crochet that you just made. This will now be the start of your round. Continue working 1 single crochet in each stitch around on this fin. We'll then move on to the other fin. Make sure that when you're crocheting around this fin that you're not going into the sides of stitches, rather only the top 2 loops of a stitch. When you've finished crocheting around this fin piece, you'll so far have 6 single crochet stitches. Now you'll start crocheting into your other fin piece. Continue working 1 single crochet in every stitch around this fin piece. You may notice a gap between the fins. Don't worry about that, we will fix that in a bit. Continue working your single crochets until you reach your stitch marker and the end of this round. Now that your tail fins are attached, we can sew up that open space between the two. Pull your hook up to make a larger loop so you don't pull out any stitches, and remove your hook. And this is what your tail fin should look like so far. To sew this up, grab your yarn needle, and you can use the yarn tail left over from when you fastened off the first fin, or if it's not long enough, you can just grab a scrap piece of yarn. Thread your yarn needle and begin sewing the hole closed. This will only take a couple paths around to get the hole closed. When you've closed up the gap, secure your yarn and hide the yarn tail inside. Add stuffing to each tail fin. The tail fins are very small and only require a small amount of stuffing. Remember to pull the stuffing apart before you fill the piece. Use the end of your crochet hook to help push the stuffing inside. When you finish stuffing the tail fins, We can move on to round 7. Place your hook back in the loop and pull the yarn tight against your hook. Remove your stitch marker and work 2 single crochets into the first stitch. Place your stitch marker in the first stitch of this round and work 1 single crochet into the next stitch. Continue this repeating sequence of 2 single crochets into the next stitch, followed by 1 single crochet into the next until you've reached the end of round 7. Make sure that you're working into the top 2 loops of a stitch whenever you cross over where your fins are connected. When you've reached the end of round 7, you will have a total of 18 stitches. Moving on to round 8 and the final round, we'll be working a repeating sequence of 2 single crochets in one stitch, followed by 1 single crochet in each of the next 2. Remove your stitch marker and work 2 single crochets into the first stitch, and then replace your stitch marker into the first stitch of this round, and then work 1 single crochet into the next stitch and 1 single crochet into the one after that. Continue working 2 single crochets into the next stitch, 1 single crochet and 1 single crochet until you reach the end of round 8. At the end of round 8, you'll have a total of 24 stitches. That finishes our tail fin. So now we're going to cut our yarn, leaving a long tail for sewing. And then fasten off by pulling the yarn tail all the way through the loop on your hook. Pull the yarn tail tightly to secure it. And remove your stitch marker. Next, we'll move on to assembly. Now it's time to attach the tail to the back of the whale. We'll be attaching the tail over rounds 10 through 14 of the whale body. Pinch the sides of the tail together a bit to create more of a long oval shape. Use pins to help position the tail and hold it in place. The bottom part of the tail will line up directly where your color change between the blue color to the white color is. The top of the tail should sit just over round 10. Add pins around the tail to help keep it in place. Make sure that you are happy with the placement and make any adjustments now. The tail should have about the same distance between the tail and each side fin. Now it's time to begin sewing. Thread your yarn needle with the yarn tail. And begin sewing the tail around, securing it to the body. Make sure that you're pulling the yarn tightly so that you don't leave any gaps. Continue sewing the tail around until you have just a small opening remaining. Before the tail is attached completely, we'll need to add a bit of stuffing. Just like before, pull the stuffing apart using only small pieces at a time. Try to keep your pin in place so that you don't mess up your placement. After you have enough stuffing, continue sewing. Finish sewing the tail the rest of the way around. When you've finished sewing, secure your yarn with a knot and hide your ends inside. Cut any excess yarn. Now the whale is completely assembled. Now it's time to embroider eyebrows. The eyebrows will begin 2 rounds above the eye on the inside and cross over 3 stitches and down 1 round. Thread your yarn needle with black yarn. Count up 2 rounds above the eye. This will mark one end of the eyebrow. Trace a diagonal line across 3 stitches and down 1 round. Insert your yarn needle through that stitch to have it come out the other end of the eyebrow. This is a great way to visualize the placement of the eyebrow. When you're happy with the placement, push your yarn needle through. Next, push your yarn needle through the first stitch that you entered in the direction of the other eye. Double check the placement of the first eyebrow. And now we'll make the second eyebrow beginning 2 stitches above the eye, crossing diagonally down 3 stitches in 1 round. When you've identified the other end of the eyebrow, push your yarn needle through, and you can have the yarn needle come out in the center of the forehead. Check that you're happy with the placement of the eyebrows before you pull the yarn all the way through. Make sure that the eyebrows are symmetrical. If they're not, just pull the yarn through and redo it. When you're happy with the placement of the eyebrows, cut the yarn and secure it. You can bring both yarn ends together out of the same stitch. So I'm going to take this yarn tail out through the forehead. And again, just double checking the placement one last time before tying these yarn tails in a knot. After the yarn tails are secure, hide them inside of your project. You can use the end of your yarn needle to fix the shaping. Cut any excess yarn and hide it inside. And that completes this project. You've just made a whale.